Hello, welcome to Zigmatech Learninghub. I'll be your instructor for biology. For this class, we are going to be taking our exercises from the ExamGuide app. Now, if you don't already have this installed in your device, I would like you to download the app in order to follow along in this class. Now, ExamGuide is a leading educational app that helps students prepare adequately for various exams. Exams such as the UTME, the post-UTME, WEAC, GCE, IJMB, KCPE, JUPEB, COMPLEXITIES. In the junior sections, we also have the BECE, we have the SSCE, and so much more. Now, you can download the app from www.examguide.com or you visit the Google Play Store to download. Now, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to update yourselves on new videos that will be coming up. Now, if you're ready for this class, let's get started. Today's topic, we're going to be looking at organizations of life. Organizations of life. I'd like you to understand that life or living things are highly organized. They are highly organized. Now, we're going to be looking at some of the objectives as students or as learners you should take note of at the end of this lesson. The first one is that by the end of this lesson, learners should be able to mention and define the 4 levels of organizations of life. Mention and define the 4 levels of organizations of life. The second one is that by the end of this lesson, learners, which is you, should be able to give some examples in each of the levels of organizations of life. Examples in each of the organizations of life. And then finally, you should be able to mention some advantages and some disadvantages, at least 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of complexities in higher organisms. Now, if you are set, let's start up. 4 levels of organizations of life. Remember, I said that life is highly, or living things are highly organized. And this organization occurs in 4 different levels. 4 different levels. The first level is called cells. The first level is called cells. The second level is called tissues. Excuse me. The second level is called tissues. The third is called organs. The third is organs, and then the fourth is system. In some other books, you will see they might even add organism or body as the 5th. But basically, we have 4 levels of organizations of life: cells, tissues, organs, and then systems. Let's begin with the first one, which is called cells. By definition, cells are the smallest, simplest, basic, structural, fundamental, and functional unit of life. Now, if you check the display on the screen, you will notice that it is highlighted in red color. That's to tell you that these are keywords when defining cells. When defining cells, take note of these keywords. They are the smallest, they are the simplest, they are the basic, they are the structural, they are the fundamental, and they are the functional unit of life. It simply means that there is no life apart from the life of a cell. Now, cells are the first levels of organizations of life. Cells are the first levels of organizations of life. All living organisms are made up of cells. Plants are made up of cells. Animals as well are made up of cells. All living organisms are made up of cells. Now, next I want you to understand is that living organisms are divided into 2 based on the number of cells they have. Living organisms are divided into 2 based on the number of cells they have. There are living organisms that are made up of just 1 cell, or you can say they are called single cell because they're just made up of one cell. And please make no mistake about this. A cell has the ability to carry out all the activities of life. That is why cells are referred to as the basic. Cells are referred to as the basic. The reason why cells are referred to as the basic unit of life is that they can carry out all life functions, all life processes. And these life processes are simply the characteristics of living things. It means that cells can move, cells can respire, cells feed, cells respond to external changes in their environment. So all these activities of life, all these characteristics of life can still be carried out by a cell. So living organisms are divided into two main groups, like we said before. Unicellular organisms, which means a cell is made up of just one cell. The organism is made up of just one cell. Uni. The word uni simply means one. Or another name for unicellular organism is single-celled organisms. Single-celled organisms. And like I said before, a cell, as it is a unit of life. It can also carry out all characteristics of living things. Examples of unicellular organisms, we have the amoeba, we have paramecium, we have euglena, we have chlamydomonas, and so many others. They fall under unicellular organisms. Now, the next type of organisms based on the number of cells is multicellular organisms, otherwise called many-celled organisms. Multi talks about many. So it means that they are made up of groups of cells put together. Groups of cells. These organisms consist of groups or millions or more than two cells. Multi. Examples of these type of organisms include all higher plants and animals. It simply means that in you and me, we have billions of cells. Billions of cells. So many cells in us that makes up who we are. Now, look at the structure let's take a look at the structure of an amoeba cell. As you can see there, the cell can move. The word, if you check on the screen, if you look at my cursor, I'm pointing out what we call pseudopodia. Pseudopodia. Now, the pseudopodia, one of the major functions of the pseudopodia is that it carries out the process of movement. Remember, I told you that a cell can function or can carry out all life processes, which means they can perform the characteristics of living things. Amoeba can move from one place to another. That is movement. That is one of the characteristics of living things. Reproduction. Amoeba can reproduce. What is reproduction? The ability to give rise to new individuals after the kind. Now, the nucleus plays that major role. The nucleus plays that role of reproduction. The nucleus plays that major role of reproduction. Also, the pseudopodia plays the role of nutrition by a process we call engulfing. Amoeba undergoes a process of feeding we call engulfing, and it uses the help of the pseudopodia and also the food vacuoles. You can see the cursor identifying the food vacuoles. You can see it. It has a yellow, is spherical. That's the food vacuoles. It's for feeding, So we can cover that with, or we can use that to say that amoeba undergoes nutrition. Okay. We also have several things, like we have the other one, which is in I think a blue spherical organelle there. We call it the contractile vacuoles. One of the major functions of the contractile vacuoles is for osmoregulation and also for removal of waste, which is excretion. So in other words, the amoeba carries out several activities of life as a single cell. As a single cell, it carries out life processes. Now, the next is tissues. Tissues. Now, tissues are the second level of organizations of life. The second level of organizations of life. Now, tissues are groups of similar cells. Please take note of this word. Similar cells. Groups of similar cells which aggregate together to perform a particular function. Which aggregate together to perform a particular function. Note these keywords. They are very, very important. Note that tissues must be groups of cells. They are groups of cells, not just one cell, but groups of cells make up tissues. And not just group of cells making up tissues, they perform a particular function. They perform a particular function. Now, we have several examples of tissues in plants and also tissues in animals. Examples of tissues in plants. We have what we call the xylem tissue. The xylem tissue is a tissue that helps to transport water and mineral salts from the roots to the leaves and to other parts of the plant. It transports water and mineral salts. We have phloem tissue. The phloem tissue helps to transport manufactured food from the leaves to other parts of the plants, including the roots. We have the parenchyma, we have the sclerenchyma tissues, we have the cholenchyma tissues. All these tissues are what we call supporting tissues. They provide flexibility, they provide resilience, they provide support to plants as a whole. They provide resilience, flexibility, rigidity, and support to plant as a whole. So they are called supporting tissues. We also have examples of tissues in animals. Tissues in animals. We have the blood. The blood, though a fluid, it is called a fluid tissue. The blood is also referred to as a fluid tissue. If you look at the blood is made up of cells. We have the red blood cells, we have the white blood cells, we have the platelets. These are groups of cells that come together and carry out the function of transportation. Now, the blood is a transport medium. Is a transport medium. Okay? We also have the muscles. We have the bones. We have cells in the bones. Cells in the bones, they are called chondroblasts. Osteocytes. They are called the osteocytes. They are very, very important for the structure of the bones. We also have the cartilage. The cartilage is also a tissue. Okay? These are some of the examples of tissues that are found in animals. Now, there are organisms also that exist only as a tissue. Just the same way we have the amoeba exist as a cell, there are examples of organisms that exist as a tissue. We have the hydra. We also have the sponge. The sponge, which is the simplest form of animals that are found in kingdom Animalia. We have the spongy or the sponge. So hydra is a perfect example of an organism that exists solely as a tissue. Now, the study of tissues in biology is a science. A science of studying tissues in biology is referred to as what? Histology. It's referred to as histology. Now, that is the structure of hydra. You see it mostly in aquatic habitats. That is a hydra. You see the tentacles. That is a hydra. Okay? So when you see it, note that this is a tissue, not an organ. It doesn't have any system. So it is just group of cells that makes this organism. The next is organs. Organs. Now, what are organs? The same definition we gave for tissues is the same definition for organs. The only difference is that in tissues we have group of similar cells, but in organs we're supposed to be groups of similar tissues. Now, note that organs are the third levels of organizations of life. So what are organs? They are groups of similar tissues which aggregate together or come together to perform a particular function. Groups of similar tissues which aggregate together to perform a particular function. That is what we call organs. Now, let's take a look at some examples of organs in plants and some examples of organs in animals. Examples of organs in plants. We have the leaves. The leaf is an organ. We have the roots. The root is an organ. Of course, you know one of the major functions of the leaf is for production or manufacturing of food. That is the site of photosynthesis, mostly for green plants. We have the roots. One of the major functions of the roots is to absorb water and mineral salts from the soil to other parts of the plants. And then we have the stem. The stem serves as a conducting tissue or conducting organ. It consists of several tissues. Tissues like the xylem, we have the phloem, they are found in the stem. The xylem, the phloem are found in the stem. The xylem and also the phloem is found in the roots. The xylem and the phloem are also found in the leaves. Parenchyma is also a tissue. It is also found in the leaves. So you can see, like we said before, that organs are groups of tissues which aggregate together and they carry out a particular function. So in leaves, there are groups of tissues. In roots, there are groups of tissues. In stems, there are groups of tissues. Also, flowers are also organs. Please also take note, onion. The onion bulb is an organ. The onion bulb is an organ, okay? Now, examples of organs in animals. Examples of organs in animals. We have the heart, which is an organ, okay? We have the brain, we have the liver, we have the kidney, we have the lungs, we have the skin. All these are organs in the body. Now let's take a look at one of the structures of these organs in animals, that is the kidney. The kidney, as you can see on the screen, the kidney is made up of several tissues. We have the blood vessels, which can also be referred to as tissues. We have the renal artery, we have the renal vein, we also have the ureter, which connects or collects urine from the kidney when it is formed to the bladder, and when the bladder is full, it is then emptied out through the urethra. So the kidney is an organ. Moving to the next, systems. Now the systems are the fourth level. It is the fourth level of organization of life. Systems are the fourth level of organizations of life. What is a system? The same definition we gave for organ and tissues. The only thing that changes here is the word tissues and cells. In systems, it has to do with groups of similar cells, or similar organs rather, which aggregate together to perform a particular function. In organs, it has to do with groups of tissues. In tissues, groups of cells. In systems, groups of organs. Okay? So groups of organs come together and carry out a particular function. Let's take a look at some examples of systems in living organisms. They are found both in plants and also in animals. We have digestive system, which is found in animals. Digestive system is a system. It consists of several organs. We're going to be looking at that much later. It consists of several organs, and these organs carry out the function of digesting or breaking down food substances in the body into simple absorbable forms. Then we also have respiratory system. If you check the respiratory system, they are made of group of organs that carry out the sole function of respiration. We also have the excretory system that is composed of organs that carry out the function of excretion. The same thing with reproduction, the same with transport system. Okay? These are all examples of system. Let's take a look at digestive system. As you can see, the liver, you can see with the cursor, the liver is also part of the digestive system. You can also see the gallbladder. It is also part of the digestive system. We also have the esophagus. As you can see on the screen there, the esophagus is also a part of the digestive system. We have the duodenum. The duodenum. which is also a part of the digestive system. We have the small intestine. We also have the large intestine. We have the rectum. All these are organs that are found in the digestive system that plays the major role of breaking down food substances into simple absorbable forms. These are their functions. Okay? Now, moving ahead, complexities of organizations in higher organisms. Now, please take note, the more cells, tissues, organs, and systems are in an organism, the more complex that organism becomes. And when there is complexities in organisms, it tends towards higher organisms. Or I can put it this way, when you're moving from unicellular organisms to multicellular organisms, there is an increase in complexities. Or you can say there is an increase in the number of cells, tissues, organs, and then systems. So we're looking at the advantage higher organisms have over lower organisms or unicellular organisms. There is an advantage. There is an advantage. This complexity comes with an advantage. As you can see here, we said that it becomes more complex, and this ensures efficient survival. Efficient survival. Higher organisms survive more in their environment compared to unicellular organisms. Now, it is simply based on these complexities. But please do not get me wrong. There are still disadvantages. That is, there are ways unicellular organisms gain advantage. There are some advantage of unicellular organisms over higher organisms. Now let's take a look at some advantages. Some advantages. Number one, I have about 4 of them here. There are more than 4, but let's look at these 4. One, it leads to cellular differentiation. It simply means that each of these cells carry out different functions. Each of these groups of cells carry out different functions. And when they carry out different functions, it leads to number 2, which is efficiency. So you see efficient way of carrying out functions. For instance, we move better. We can walk better. We can carry out the process of respiration better, or the process of reproduction better than lower organisms. There is efficiency in carrying out the functions. Cells carrying out their functions. Number 3, it leads to increase in size. The reason for the increase in size is because there is enough space for growth between the cells. Enough space for growth, mostly in higher organisms. Number 4, we said it leads to increase in adaptation to environment. It simply means higher organisms adapt to their environment more better or better than lower organisms. They adapt to the environment better than lower organisms. Now let's repeat it again. Advantages. Number 1, I said it leads to cellular differentiation. Number 2, it leads to efficiency. They do their work or they carry out their functions effectively and efficiently. Number 3, it leads to increase in size. And that is why you can't compare a multicellular organism with a unicellular organism. The unicellular organism, you even need a microscope to view it. An example is amoeba. You need a microscope to see or view an amoeba, but you don't need a microscope to see, let's say, a rat or an ant, or let me say a snake. You don't need a microscope to view that, okay? Because of the change or the difference in size. And number 4, like we said, is it leads to increase in adaptation to their environment. Now, what are some of the disadvantages? Some disadvantages. Disadvantages. Number 1, it leads to slower rate of diffusion. Slower rate of diffusion. Now, this is the disadvantage of higher organisms. Now, please take note. Diffusion is based on the surface to volume ratio. It's based on surface to volume ratio. The higher the surface to volume ratio, the higher the rate of diffusion. Please listen. The higher the surface to volume ratio, the higher the rate of diffusion. And surface to volume ratio is higher in unicellular organisms than in multicellular organisms. I repeat, the surface area to volume ratio in unicellular organisms is higher compared to the surface area to volume ratio in higher organisms. And based on this, gaseous exchange or diffusion of gases into the cells of unicellular organisms is faster compared to that of higher organisms. So it leads to slower rate of diffusion. It simply means that unicellular organisms exchange gases faster and easily than higher organisms. Number two, there is a decrease in ability to regenerate. Regeneration has to do with the ability of a part of the body to grow back again after being removed. To grow back again after being removed. If you cut a part of the body of a unicellular organism, they have the ability to grow back that same path. But in terms of higher organisms, for instance, we, the higher animals, you can't cut off a part of your body. If you should remove your hand, there is no way it will regenerate. So there is a decrease in ability to regenerate. Number three, a slower rate of expulsion of waste products. In higher organisms, there is a slower rate of removing waste products. Just the same way I told you of the rate of diffusion of gases is based on the surface to volume ratio, surface area to volume ratio in terms of unicellular organisms. It is also applicable in this case in terms of removing or expelling out waste products. There is also slower rates of removing waste products in higher organisms. And then finally, number four, difficulty in reproduction. Difficulty in reproduction. In unicellular organisms, reproduction is as easy as ABC. For instance, let's take an instance of a bacteria. A bacteria within 48 hours can replicate into millions of cells through a process we call binary fission. Binary fission is a type of asexual reproduction. The same thing with an amoeba. If it wants to reproduce, it undergoes binary fission, and it can replicate into numerous number of cells within a day. While in higher organisms, example human beings, it takes us 9 months. Theirs is within days. Ours is within 9 months to give birth to even a child. So you can see that there is difficulty in reproduction in higher organisms when compared to lower organisms. Now, having come to the end of this topic on organizations of life, I would like us to look at some practical questions from SSCE, past questions. We're going to be using the exam guide to help us look at this. Now let's go to the exam guide. We're going to pick very few questions because of time. Let's get started with this. Now take a look at question 1. Question 1. The organism at the organ organization of life. Remember we talked about organ organization as one of the level. The organism at the organ organization of life is what? Is it euglena? Euglena? No. Euglena is a cell. Is it Spirogyra? No. Spirogyra is a cell. Is it ginger? Probably. Yes, ginger is a cell. It's not a cell, it's an organ. It's not even a tissue. Okay? And then D, we have tapeworm. Tapeworm is not an organ. Tapeworm is not an organ. Just the same way I told you that the onion bulb is an organ, ginger is also an organ. It's part of the roots of a plant. And the roots of a plant, remember we said that it is an organ. So it is that. Now let's move to Look at question 2. An example of organ level of organization, okay, is we have the kidney. I showed you a picture of the kidney, or a diagram of the structure of the kidney. So kidney here is an organ level of organization. Now let me move to question 7. Okay. All right, let's look at question 9. Question 9, they said there, which of the following structures is a tissue? Remember, we have talked about tissues. Which of the following structures is a tissue? We have A, vessel element, B, blood, C, sieve tube elements, and D, erythrocytes. Another name for erythrocytes is the red blood cells. Erythrocytes are the red blood cells. So you can see it is a cell. The sieve tube element is also found in the phloem, and the vessel element, I think, also in the phloem. But B is the correct answer, which is blood. And blood is a fluid tissue. A fluid tissue. Now let's look at question 12. Question 12, we talked about advantages and disadvantages. Now look at this question. The disadvantage of complexity of organization in higher organism is that it leads to A, they said mutual interdependence between component cells, B, internal structure specialization, C, increased adaptation to environment, and D, slower rate of diffusion of oxygen to individual cells. Remember, we talked about this. The correct answer here is slower rate of diffusion. It is a strong disadvantage. It can't be adaptation to the environment. We said that is an advantage. It can also be internal structural specialization. It's one of the advantages of complexities in higher organisms. And also mutual interdependence between component cells is also an advantage of complexities in higher organisms. So the correct answer here is D. Question 13. Look at this question. It says, which of these has most complex level of organization? Now, what is the complex level of organization? The complex level of organization is supposed to be system. That's the complex, followed by organs, followed by tissues. The simplest is cells. Now, look at option A, euglena. Euglena is a cell, which is the simplest level. B, hydra. Remember I told you hydra is an organism that exists as a tissue. So tissues are also not the complex. If we keep going down, we have heart. The heart is an organ. And then D is a virus. Virus is also a cell. Okay, if we're classifying it as a living thing, it's regarded as a cell, if you're looking at it as a living thing. So we have A, cells, we have B, hydra, we have C, heart, and then we have D, cell. So which of them there is the most complex? The most complex is the heart, which is an organ. And then finally, question 20. Question 20, they said the epidermis of the mammalian skin. The epidermis of a mammalian skin is an example of a tissue. Why? Because the cells, A, is it that they prevent light from penetrating through the skin? No. B, is it that they have similar structure and functions? C, is it that they prevent excessive loss of water? And D, is it that they are impregnated with keratin? No. None of those options has anything to do with a tissue. The correct option there is B. They have similar structure and they carry out the same function. The same function. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using your ExamGuide app. The app scores and gives a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. You can also learn particular topics of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and even practice mode. It also has other features that makes learning very fun. Now, it is a must for all serious students. Download from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels, hit the notification bell, and share the videos to your loved ones and friends that will benefit from it. Bye for now.